Here, I know what I did. I'll restart. Hi everyone. I didn't start the stream correctly. This is Ethereum Core Developer Meeting 87, and we are going to agenda item number 1, which is the Berlin EIPs. Um, that is going to be a clickable link in the agenda that opens up a spreadsheet that Pooja from the Ethereum Cat Herders created and is working with the Ethereum Cat Herders and James Hancock to continue to be updated. I'm going to have James take over, and he's looking to share a screen in a second, or I'll share my screen if he can't figure it out, to go through the different clients and the status of each EIP. James, you want me to share my screen?
Yes, it's giving me something. I have to do permissions for something now, which I
Okay.
didn't expect.
In that case, let me find the share screen. There we go.
Right, thank you.
All right, we are here, and yeah, you can everyone can
Can
see
we
everything it looks like.
can we go back to the thing?
Oh, the agenda.
The spreadsheet.
Oh, is it not showing up?
Nope, you're dating for Berlin. I decided to withdraw the difficulty bomb because I'd rather focus on making sure that Berlin gets out in time for the ETH 2 stuff. So that can just go into the next one. And I don't know the status exactly of 2046, but I'm assuming that that will not be ready in time, and that's fine because we can do one in a few months after Berlin for the EIPs that are ready for it. Doesn't make sense to wait for anything on at least waiting for EIPs that are almost ready. So EIP 2315 symbol subroutines. If I could get just status updates from each client, and we'll just go through the ones for Berlin, which is the 2315 and the 2537. And starting with Geth.
Well,
So go
yeah, I
ahead,
just
Peter.
say that as far as I know, the spec isn't even completely final yet. So
Yeah, I would like to add to that the spec is currently, well, up until today, before I think Greg made a change today, but the spec up until today is implemented in a PR. It passes the test. I mean, it says in the comments there, and it is more or less done. Having said that, we do anticipate that the spec may change.
Okay. Open Ethereum.
So basically, we have merged 2315 into master branch today, as it was 1 month ago. So if the spec was changed today, then the current code in Open Ethereum master does not reflect it. So I guess we need to have some investigation here.
Yeah, a question: did you guys check out the tests that were made as a PR to the test repo from the BSU team?
I'm not sure. We'll take a look.
Yeah, please do, and just give a thumb up if you pass them or not.
Okay. Besu.
For Besu, we're in the same boat. We've merged, or I think have a PR ready to merge the spec as it is, but we're kind of blocked on basically the spec getting finalized. Like Martin said, we wrote some acceptance tests, I believe, like that reflects the spec as it was when we wrote the test, but it would be really, I guess the biggest blocker for us is just getting like a final agreement on the EAP.
Yeah, the intent is to settle that Monday, and so I should be able to get a final spec Monday, Tuesday.
Right, and so we're a few of us are going to have a call, but naturally, if anyone who has a particular opinion about this way or that way or whatever, yeah, you're welcome to join. Just ping us.
Yeah.
Where can people do that?
Well, I don't know. I guess the old Cordev channel.
Okay.
Probably.
Or Hudson or somebody could volunteer to sort of get it organized, as random pings may not converge on a consensus.
I can do that. If anybody, I can talk with you, Martin, later about times, and if anyone wants to join, just have them ping me.
Yeah, good. Okay, we're spread across a lot of time zones.
Yep, that's pretty normal. Nethermind. Someone here from Nethermind today? And I understand we'll probably talk more about the state of 2315 later at the time. I just wanted to kind of get this go through initially, so to get everybody on the same page where things are. EIP 2537, the BLS curve operations. Starting with Geth.
So there is an open PR on our repo. The PR was kind of, I think, updated with the final-ish code from the author yesterday. And it's 16,000 lines of code. So I think that kind of sums it up, the status.
Yeah. I talked with Alex earlier about getting more testing and things ready that he wanted. So open PR, it's just a giant block of code that we still need to make sure works.
Yeah.
Open Ethereum.
So there was big update on this front from us. So we actually have 2 PRs open for this now, using different implementations. One from Alex Vlasov from MetaLabs, and the other one by Way, which uses the Milagro library, which are the bindings developed by Lighthouse, basically. So yeah, we have 2 open PRs, and we would like to test both of them, but we will have them ready in any case.
Cool. So I'll put that as PR here. Besu?
So same thing, we have a PR. I think the only blocker is having the final addresses for the precompiles, and then it'll be ready to merge.
Okay, and Nethermind is in here. I already went through not withdrawing the 2515 for Berlin. And then if someone here has an update on 2046, we could go to it, but otherwise I'd like to move on.
Actually, it has been implemented in Open Ethereum approximately a month ago, I think.
All right. So as a PR or merged?
Merged in master.
And if that's all that, I think I will turn it back. Well, then do you want to talk about 2315 first, Greg, or do we want to talk about timing for things?
So wait, just for 2046, did we decide we're not doing that in Berlin? Should clients start implementing it? It's been kind of unclear these past couple calls what the status what it is. Yeah, I'm just curious to see what everyone else is thinking about this.
I have a comment on that. I think 3 or 4 calls ago, when we last discussed it in depth, when Alex also explained his benchmarks and findings, we left these final comments on the PM issue. And the suggestion was that the repricing of the BN precompiles should be part of 2046, and because those are necessary because they were underpriced. And the repricings for the other precompiles should be separate EIPs because those are not necessary for security. Those are just a benefit to the users. But none of these changes were applied to any of the EIPs. And I remember also Alex proposed that he may be, or said that he may be proposing a lower number, potentially 0, as a cost for static call. So I don't think anything has changed or moved on this direction.
Yeah, just because it wasn't final whether it goes into Berlin or is delayed, and most likely it should be split in two. I think it should be easy to adjust price of one of BNP compiles, which is the only one affected, by reducing of say a static call to precompile price. But unfortunately, I didn't do any EAP for this. So maybe I don't know who is the author of 2046. Maybe it can just be extended, but it also requires to increase the price of one of the existing precompiles to cover this cost. But yeah, from technical perspective, it only requires to increase the price of one BN edition precompile and reduce the cost of static calls without any additional security issues. Have we done the test? What my understanding was, we like comprehensive benchmarks were something that was needed before all of this is accepted. Is that?
I think
Or Martin, go ahead.
No,
I think somebody
that has not been done.
Yeah, was it you, Martin? You wanted to also replicate the results on Go Ethereum?
Exactly, yeah. And I kind of told all the client implementers that you guys may want to test your nodes, your clients. But in particular, I care about Go Ethereum and want to benchmark that.
Is anyone particularly motivated to do all the work needed to get it in before Berlin? Does someone want, or I don't want to say it can't make it or it won't make it. Without someone driving it really hard, I don't see that exactly happening. Well, at the moment, I can only tell that eventually I will also try to do it on gas, but Go is not a language which I know well in particular. Much harder situation will be with other clients, but eventually it should be a larger work, which includes repricing of other precompiles, which are currently hugely overpriced.
And we want to keep in mind the EIP-centric process where we're not trying to, work around. We're trying to work around which EIPs are done.
That is a good call. So, thoughts on Martin?
Yes.
Go ahead. I feel like you have thoughts, so bring it on.
So my gut reaction is that there is no chance that Geth will be ready with the BLS curve operations for mainnet launch date in July.
Like in July, like any part of July?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know, Peter, what do you think?
I don't know. I can't really say. So the thing is, we have this gigantic PR. We can definitely review the Go parts. I mean, those probably are okay-ish, and we can fix anything that's not okay-ish. So that should be trivial enough to merge. As for the crypto part, I personally cannot review that. I mean, I cannot meaningfully either the crypto itself, the math itself, or the assembly itself. So from my perspective, the only thing we can do is fuzz it to death. But that, I don't know what timeline is realistic for something like that.
Yeah. So we are trying to pursue that angle. There is a BLS 12381 fuzzing infrastructure by Guido Branken that we're hoping we can use to fuzz it against some other libraries and also against this. There are two implementations in Go, so we can fuzz those two against each other. But it's really hard to yeah, I can't really say we're going to be done by that in time for a mainnet launch in July. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but my gut feeling is that you shouldn't hope too much for that.
If we could get the type of cryptographic experts you would need who are also familiar with Go, would that be something where they could come in and do the type of reviews necessary to make us feel a little more secure about the implementation? Would that be something that would be acceptable?
Um,
Well, I guess at the
difficult to
end of
say.
the day,
Say that again, Peter.
so I think that I guess at the end of the day, the thing is that we ourselves cannot meaningfully vouch for the code. So, I mean, we can ask other people to help out, but at the end of the day, we're still trusting somebody that the code is valid.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. So, what I personally could do is try to check the math if there is some hard reference stuff that to compare it with. But that's most of it. So, I mean, I can check that the code kind of executes some formulas, but whether that formulas are correct or not, that's completely beyond me, and I cannot do anything meaningful with them.
Because my thought was, as this is an EIP that is wanted by a few different teams across the ecosystem, namely the Ethereum 2.0 team, if they were to bring in someone who's can get familiar with the implementation code base for this EIP and just double check that it's integrated into Geth properly, that could be something that I would help arrange and find the right people for, so you all wouldn't have to waste time seeking that out.
So integrating in Geth properly, that's the easy part. We can definitely do that. The problem is with the crypto and the assembly. That's the thing that we cannot do.
Okay. Well, if you're open to it, we can talk about it afterwards in a Geth channel and just see, make sure that I understand all the requirements of what the person would need, and then I can see who would be able to help, if anyone. It's worth a try, I'm thinking.
I think I should also comment on assembly part. Even while it exists there for kind of to the limit optimizations on modern 64-bit CPUs, it's not strictly a requirement, and you should talk to Honor what will be the penalty. And I think the penalty will not be that large. You can just, and there is anyway alternative code which is in pure Go and which just implements also same stuff for systems which are not 64-bit x86. So maybe you will be able to just not kind of turn on the feature to use assembly, or at least allow end users to turn it on if they really, really want it. But I think Honor should be able to help on it. The person who did the PR. Is it something we could move forward with making a testnet date and then just say there are like things with testing and fuzz testing need to be really, really ironed out before we're comfortable with the mainnet date?
I don't know. Are you comfortable with nuking the testnet?
Yeah, I mean, we could naturally, I mean, we could just merge the thing and have it so you can enable it in via some configuration, and we could spin up a testnet. But I've noticed historically that people kind of get upset when testnets break. I don't know why, but
So do we
So,
make
yeah,
a BLS? Do we just spin up, or maybe the shadow forking Robson kind of thing that you talked about previously, Peter? Is that something we could do?
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem is that if that kind of works if you are screwing around with existing opcodes, but in this case we are deploying 8 new precompiles or however many new precompiles. So I mean, we can fork Robston, but as long as nobody is using them, it doesn't matter much. So you kind of have to convince people using them.
And I mean, in this case, it would really the case where you want to fork Robston is where you change some opcodes that is commonly used. If you just want to test the BLS stuff, there's no point in forking Robston. We can just spin up a brand new testnet if you just want to test BLS, and that's easier. So
I'm okay breaking Robston. that's
but
a
there's no
personal
point
opinion.
in breaking Robston for this.
Oh, because you can spin up a new one, is what
It's
you just
easier
said.
to do the test. Yeah, it's easier to do the testing on a brand new testnet.
And I'm sure there also we could get the E2 teams to help with some of the, I guess you could call it manual testing, but just setting up, deposit contracts and the proxy for it and having that on the new testnet. It seems like you don't need to have like that high of a volume of transaction. We just need to make sure this application for which this EAP is built works, right? Obviously in parallel to the fuzz testing.
I don't think this would really give any. I mean, it would get the coverage we would get from it is the amount of effort that people on the internet or research are willing to spend on playing with it, which probably is not that much actually. But a good thing that it would bring is that it would force all the clients to put out versions where this feature is activatable, which means that it can also be fast through the EVMs and through state tests. So I guess that's a primary upside as I see it.
Is it
But
something we
maybe
could have
some researcher actually.
So if we did a new testnet and had BLS on it, and then maybe did like a bug bounty for breaking it, would that perhaps help?
Yeah, that might be a fun idea.
Yeah, I think we should go ahead with a test net that just does the BLS curve. Is that something the Geth team wants to take on coordinating, or is that something that you'd like, I don't know who's like the most expert at running, like setting up test nets, etc.
So go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that I don't really see. So if you want to set up a testnet, then set up a testnet for everything that's supposed to be in Berlin. I mean, just picking out this single EIP would make things a lot more horrible, because then clients all of a sudden need to support a weird testnet with half-baked EIPs in it.
Oh,
I agree. I think we should have 2315 as well.
So who would try to break the BLS code?
ETH2 team and who was it? Was
Alex Vlasov?
Well, I posted a link with a kind of small repo which anyone can clone. I just start fuzzing with 2 commons. And what I need to do there is actually, I was basing the code there. I mean, I use a fuzzer which can run Rust simultaneously. So I made bindings to Go code. And I based those bindings on the old repo, which is not the one which is integrated into the Geth right now. So I need to make this adjustment somehow. And then you can literally test current PR into Geth against the code which is used by Besu and from the PR which I sent to OpenEthereum. And it's most likely much more efficient than trying to spam the network where it will be limited to how many, maybe 7 or how many million gas per 15 seconds. And each call to the precompile, which costs at least $500,000 for interesting parts. So I don't think it is a proper way to try to break the BLS precompile on a testnet. It's much easier to break it just by running a fuzzy tester. It would be good if there would be some external machine available, so you can just start it there and leave it running. But but maybe I will just spin up a server. But on a laptop, I found one problem, which is actually already fixed, and only happens because my bindings are on outdated version. So far, I didn't find any other problem.
Someone also mentioned that the ETH 2.0 team will try to break it. Are you referring to the deposit proxy?
Deposit proxy, and I felt like they had one other piece, but I could be wrong. I'm not as in tune with it.
So I think the deposit proxy hasn't been touched for a while, and I mean, it was only an experiment by Alex Stokes, I believe, but nobody is actually allocated to make this piece of code.
The last time I heard about it, I thought Alex was in the process of writing it like a month ago, but that could be completely wrong.
As far as I know, it is in a form which is kind of usable and only misses constants to kind of what addresses are available for the precompiles. Otherwise, it's kind of final draft, I think.
Yeah, so what the decisions I think we're starting to come to here are, if we do a test net, it should be a test net that covers all EIPs going into Berlin. And if we were to do a test net, we would need to pull in resources beyond fuzz. It would be ideal to pull in resources beyond fuzz testing so that they can play, so that people can play around with it, either from a let's break it perspective or from a usability perspective, I suppose. Is that at all inaccurate? Anybody? So I think the good next step would be to set a date for a new testnet that would have all of the EIPs for Berlin in them, and then between now and then, me and James and others can get together the right people to help on the like the verification of the cryptographic aspects of the implementation, and also talk to the ETH2 team and maybe other teams about what they would use this for. I know that there's more than just the ETH2 team that needs this curve and this EIP, so.
So I guess just a bit of feedback on the ETH2 side. The deposit contract, which doesn't do any BLS verification, has been audited. And that is what's used in all the test nets. And that is, I believe, what they plan to launch with. And that auditing process took quite a time. And now if you introduce this proxy, which does the verification on top, I mean, you would want to verify it as well, audit it as well. Otherwise, I mean, why should anybody trust it more than the audited underlying contract?
Well, the part of the proxy contract is it actually prevents user from making a mistake, which the user should never made at the first place. But so it's additional protection. It cannot make things worse.
Well, if there's a bug in the proxy, then you can lose all the money you're sending to it.
Well, you would lose it anyway if it wasn't there. I mean, if there is a bug in a proxy contract, which allows you to pass the invalid public key to which you will
deposit. There can be a
deposit.
bug in the proxy contract which just eats your ether.
Well, yeah, no one can neglect. But if it's a pure function which is not payable, maybe you cannot. But I mean, it cannot make things worse. If there was a mistake and it wasn't caught, well, it's not good outcome. But if
it's a pure function, it cannot be a proxy.
You can just verify. You can just verify that your public key is well formed.
So it's not a proxy.
Yeah, they call it a proxy, but it's not a proxy.
It depends how you write it. Okay.
Yeah.
The proxy is written as a proxy. It's not a pure function. It's a payable function.
Oh, okay. I was under the impression it was just a verification function. But yeah, if it's called a proxy, that makes sense. Okay, yeah.
Which I think they did that because as far as errors, so on Slice, I don't know how to say the testnet, but the ETH2 testnet, their proto Lambda found something like 150 or more keys that were submitted that were malformed, which shouldn't be possible but happened.
Yeah, and then on Topaz it was like over 400 or something, and or no, I forgot the number, but Topaz had a lot of them too. So they have incentive to get this quickly audited and quickly. Well, not that audits should be quick, but you all know what I mean. Basically, get
Yeah.
this in order.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've been submitting patches to the proxy, and I'm not sure if it's. I don't think it has been touched for at least a month.
Hmm.
I mean, I do like the idea quite a bit, and I'm definitely interested, even personally, in participating in that. But I just don't really see that there's any priority for writing and auditing this contract and launching it. And we are trying to push the PLS precompiles because the E2 team depends on it. I think it would be really good to see the priorities right, because I don't think there's any chance that the
Yeah.
E2 launch would go with the proxy.
When, like, how long would the timeline be to get an audit on the proxy? Because it seems like E2, like the beacon chain probably won't be launching this summer anyways. So is like a couple months sufficient? Because I guess if we deploy this BLS curve to mainnet, say, I don't know, let's call it August or whatever, then if they write a proxy contract over the next month or two, get it audited, is it realistic that by the end of the summer, early September, you would have that contract audited? And if that's a realistic timeline, I think it's probably still aligned with the E2 launch. Yeah, that's.
So I think it's obviously a chicken and an egg problem. I mean, why would anybody audit a deposit proxy if it depends on an unfixed underlying precompile? So maybe this idea of like a testnet for BLS might be a good idea for that reason. But yeah, I mean, I don't have a clear answer, and I don't think. I mean, nobody on this call has any idea of the E2 timelines, so I'm not sure we can answer this question.
My previous talks with the ETH2 teams was that the pieces that changed from the audit would be pretty easy to go back over if necessary, so that like there wouldn't be a lot of necessary effort to go back in. I was talking with Alex Stokes and some others. And if it's a chicken and egg problem, then let's just make the chicken or the egg, I'd say, and do the test net and then have them react accordingly instead of this like a stalemate of who's going to do what first. That'd be my recommendation.
So I also wanted to, like, before we get into this rabbit hole of the proxy, I wanted to ask, maybe I missed it previously, if there's any other use case. I mean, there's definitely a lot of use cases for the new curve, but are there any other imminent projects trying to utilize the curve?
Well, eventually, I would really want to migrate to it from BN to 5.4 as soon as it's available. Well, not as soon as it's available, as soon as we kind of conduct a trusted setup for it. But otherwise, it's a really good upgrade, which allows you to do kind of much more stuff with the snarks in the sense that you can fit much larger circuit, especially with new proof systems, which give you a slashing overhead of factor 4. So kind of every snark eventually should be migratable there.
Oh, so every snark that's currently deployed would be upgradable and therefore benefit from the gas reduction?
Most likely it's not the right way how to say it. I mean, well, it obviously depends on the snark, your security parameters,
Yeah.
and other. But if the purpose of the snark itself is some form of aggregation and compression, in principle, PLS 12's 381 allows you to fit more into a single snark for this purpose. So effectively, you pay a constant price for verification, but you pay this constant price for much larger amount of items of being compressed.
I think that, yeah. Okay, I think I get that. So Alex, I don't know if we have an exact like the team names who would use it beside what Alex mentioned or Alex Vlasov mentioned. Um, but the way I see this whole thing is, I think if we produce the testnet, we can take the gamble on the ETH2 team utilizing it, just because it's becoming more apparent that it's very valuable for them because of people messing up this. Um, oh, I forgot how to say it, but basically messing up the signing. Was it the signing key, or what's the thing that's generated that gets messed up?
Well, it's kind of, you have to deposit to a public key which is in another form on ETH 2.0, and right now you just declare it, and you don't perform any explicit verification on chain if this form is correct.
Got it. Okay.
So kind of, if you declare it as point not on the curve or something else, you will just deposit, but to the something which looks like a public key which doesn't have a private key.
Okay. I think this is a good opportunity to, one, build a test net. Number two, get more cooperation between the ETH2 and ETH1 teams to use whatever experts they have in cryptography to validate some of the stuff that we have on our end. Um, can we go forward deciding on making a test net that involves all of the Berlin EIPs, and then from there um, using that to, or having the ETH2 team use that as well as other people just trying out the test net? I guess I don't see a downside, but I was wanting to know if I'm missing anything.
So from my side, there's one kind of downside that I see. I'm okay with that downside, but the downside is if people think, oh, the testnet has been up now for a month, so and there's been no problem, so let's just do mainnet. And I don't want to give that impression. I mean, we can spin up an early testnet anytime, no problem, but it's not a signal about mainnet readiness. I just want to get that said.
Yeah, that's a narrative problem. So all we need to do is not call this a test net, but call it a alpha test net.
Yeah, whatever.
I guess what we can do is get just to get the PRs.
Oh, Peter, you cut out. Hello? Oh, Peter dropped. We'll get his comment when he comes back. Oh, Peter, you back?
I don't know what happened. Zoom crashed. So essentially, I wanted to say that I guess what we could do is just get all the clients to merge in, just merge in all the PRs for Berlin. We know that they might be a bit unstable. Then we can launch the YOLO test network. And I guess the purpose of this would be to just ask anybody to do with BLS to hit it as hard as they can just to screw with it. And then if nothing breaks for maybe a couple of weeks, then maybe it makes sense to try to fork crops. It just would be nice to have some pre-testing done on something that people don't depend on. Otherwise, I can use Puppet to create a Genesis thing to deploy some ETH stats, some faucets, some stuff like that. So we can use Puppet to deploy some infrastructure fairly quickly. And then that's a starting point where people can just screw with it.
Okay. I think that'd be great if you could get that together. And I can work with James on communicating with the ETH2 team and even maybe getting a bounty out. I'd have to work on that from a different angle, but I can take that on. So just
And
for, yeah, go ahead, Tim.
I was gonna say, I think this all makes sense. It still doesn't solve that like both these EAPs have things that are missing, I think, for clients to merge them. So Greg, you mentioned, I guess, early next week, we should expect some resolution on 2315. And then for 2537, there was still the question of like just figuring out what addresses the precompiles are at. And I know that, or I don't know actually, there's a lot of people on the call, but like if a champion for 2537 is on the call, it would be great to just get that finalized so we can actually merge this into clients and then deploy it on a testnet.
Sorry to, I may have missed. I was waiting for an opportunity. Did we move on from the BLS? I had just one last comment on it, or question rather.
We're still talking about that pretty much. We just asked if the champion could work on getting the precompile addresses together, but if you had another comment, that's fine.
It's just one of the precompiles relies on the IETF draft, and I think there came a new version of the draft came out last week or so, or this week, and I don't know if it changes anything for the EIP, but this was an outstanding question that one of the precompiles depends on an in-draft IETF specification.
Well, I can answer this one immediately. The latest version is version number 7, and it was merged, I think, a little more than a week ago, but it was already based on version 7 at some point. It just simplified the part which actually wasn't even in precompile, so kind of it didn't affect us. It was a kind of draft itself specifies. Well, it kind of affected the precompile, but in a very small manner. It just depends how you define a sign of the field element, and it actually simplifies the code. So it was already implemented on top of the draft, which was known to come up more than a month ago. So it doesn't affect any current code. It was already modified to support the latest draft, and EASE 2.0 also was intending to move to this one. So in this sense, those are converged.
Yeah, that is the other question. It's unclear when this IETF specification is going to be finalized, and it is also unclear if E2 is going to lock in a version.
They said the other week they're locking in 7, I think. 7 or 8, I forgot which one.
So then is the precompile going to be locked to version 7 just to support E2.0? Or, it's like an open question.
Well, so far, I don't know on any plan to make a new draft which would affect the part which is implemented in the precompile. Actually, only 2 precompiles out of set of 9, which are part of this EIP, will only be affected by any changes in the future, and everything else that is not affected by changes in the draft. I cannot guarantee that there will be no changes, but if right now we accept that it's version 7, those 2 precompiles will stay at version 7, and if maybe in the future later on it will require an extension or change, then there should be 2 other precompiles, or maybe at this point we will already move past it.
Yeah, I really hope we can avoid another like Ketchak 256 versus Shatri situation.
Yeah.
Well, the situation was more about the change in the standard was in kind of a way which felt like downgrade in security. So that's why it wasn't widely accepted by kind of community, I would say.
So Filecoin, Ethereum Foundation, and I believe Starkware are all coordinating on which IETF draft of the curve that they're going to be implementing. I think that's 7. I'll check on that. But if your concern is everyone being on the same page, Axic, then I think that we will get information from the ETH2 team once we start talking to them about if this is messed up or not, because they'll be looking at it.
At least so far, I don't know of any draft of the next draft. So far, we cannot progress any further.
Yeah, they have to pick one at some point.
Yeah, and regarding the precompiled addresses, I don't know who should assign them. I mean, I can write the numbers which are just next 9 precompiled, starting from the the largest available right now, but I don't know whose responsibility is to actually make them solid. I can put them in the draft. It's not a problem.
I mean, I don't think it matters. So pick whatever makes sense and run with it.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so we're gonna start the so decisions being made. I'm talking to the ETH2 team with James and a few other people. We're coordinating them looking over the different code bases, particularly the Geth code base for cryptographic, for the cryptography behind it. We are starting the first Ethereum alpha testnet that will not necessarily be a predecessor to a mainnet, but rather be its own independent testnet, and that's going to be called Alpha Testnet YOLO. And according to the comments in chat, at least, if anyone has any disagreement, then
You should call it an ephemeral testnet.
okay, yeah.
What about an ethereal testnet?
That's just going to make people think it's an Ethereum testnet. Yeah, because that just sounds so similar. I like the idea, though.
Testnet Berlin YOLO.
Ephemeral testnet Berlin YOLO. Okay. So we're doing that. Let's move on, unless anyone had any final things.
Not final thing, a question to a testnet. So I'm not sure which clients are going to serve Berlin on mainnet, but are those clients, is every client supporting the click thing, or should I make it a proof of work?
So if you don't support click, speak up.
Or if you want proof of work.
We don't know about Nethermind. That's the only thing. So can
Nethermind is on Gurley and Rinkaby, so they definitely support.
I didn't know. Oh, Gorley is click, isn't it? Everyone supports click then, yes. Except, I mean, Ethereum JS may not, but I don't think they've had a representative on the call for a while.
Okay, just that.
Okay, sounds good. All right, let's move on.
Just it's generally we've had issues when there's some big miner and then there's some asymmetry and then all hell breaks loose. So
yeah,
it might make sense to run something a bit more stable.
That's a good idea. Okay, we're skipping EFI, so we can go to some of the EIPs that people wanted to bring up for the first time. I think that's a good idea, at least. What do you think, James? We've kind of gone over some of these before.
Yep, perfect.
Okay. Berlin timing. So we're almost off of Berlin, but now we've crossed out the mainnet date. The proposed testnet date, I think we could have our alpha testnet YOLO, or the alpha testnet YOLO sooner, right?
But do we actually have to schedule that? Can't just Peter define it?
Oh, yeah, we don't really need to schedule that because it's not on a block number and it's just going to happen when it happens. Yeah, that sounds fine.
Well, yeah, the only thing we kind of need to figure out is what's going to go. So I guess the BLS, we need the pre-compile numbers, but that should be fairly done. And the only thing we need to figure out is what happens with what's it called, subroutine jump thing, so that everybody can.
But let's assume that we'll figure something out early next week and have it implemented in end of next week, something like that.
Yeah, so
at the earliest.
So it'd be 2315 simple subroutines and 2537 BLS 12381 curve. Those would be the two additional EIPs that would be involved in this ephemeral testnet.
Yeah, and if we make any changes, we just restart the testnet.
Okay. And then, so timing then, James, do you want to go over that, or is that something we shouldn't even bring up today now that we've had a lot of this new information? Oh, and James, you're muted if you're talking.
I am. I just said I think I'm muted. Well, I don't think we need to go more into the testing. It would be nice to get up the testnet by the first week of June, so then people can that social coordination can start happening around that time. Would be nice.
Great. Okay. Next up, I just put this agenda item number 4 back in from the last meeting. I don't know if anyone's here to speak on it. It's 2565, repricing of the EIP 198 mod EXP precompile.
Hey, Hudson. Yeah, I'm here. Let me share my screen real quick. Great. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. This should be a fairly quick update. Just looking for some directional guidance here on which direction to take with the CIP. So just as a quick refresher, EIP 2565 is to reprice the mod X precompile. I came in about a month ago, after doing quite a bit of benchmarking on Go Ethereum. We found out that Go Ethereum was about 10x overpriced. And so we recommended changing a simple parameter from 20 to 200 to more accurately price that precompile. At that time, Martin had asked, I believe, he had recalled that during the original pricing that parity was quite a bit slower. So we went off and benchmarked parity, and sure enough, it was about 2 to 5 times slower, therefore making the sort of 10x gas reduction not able to be done with parity because it'd make the gas price too slow or too low. So what we went off and did last week was go and look at alternative libraries for parity or Open Ethereum to use. We found some Rust bindings first we looked at just simple version bumps of the parity precompile because it was, quite a bit out of date at the suggestion of Alex Vlasov. Unfortunately, these didn't get us, near the performance of Geth. We were still seeing about, 2 to 4x slower than Geth. So we went and looked at Rust GMP. We were able to benchmark this, and if parity or Open Ethereum uses this, they'll actually be faster than Geth. So this was some feedback based off, I think from Peter 2 weeks ago. He said, hey, it seemed kind of weird that Rust is slower than Go. And sure enough, if they use this precompile or this library, they'll actually be faster. So there are 2 paths forward with this EIP. The first option is to continue with the simple parameter change for both, Geth as well as Open Ethereum, where we change this parameter from 20 to 200, and Open Ethereum goes in and implements this GMP library instead of what they have today, and that will keep everything, above 20 or 25 million gas per second, which is sort of the standard that we're seeing for precompiles. So this is option 1. I did send some information into the Open Ethereum Discord. Their only reservation that they said that they had was that Rust GMP may not compile on Windows on Visual Studio. This was some feedback from Artem. I went and looked at Ether nodes. Right now, there are 20 parity nodes running on Windows that are synced to the mainnet. So I'm not sure how big of a concern this is. So, our recommendation would be that Open Ethereum, adopts this library and we go with the simple parameter change. If that's not possible, we can go with a more complicated pricing formula change for both Geth and Open Ethereum, and then just make a minor version bump to the Open Ethereum library. We won't get quite as much savings, and it is maybe a little bit more complicated of a pricing change that makes the pricing formula more accurate to the complexity. But this is another option to move forward. And so I really just wanted to have a discussion. I'd like to move this EIP towards, eligible for inclusion, and we just need some direction on which of these 2 options to go with here.
So I'm just going to spin up the Windows machine, Windows VPS next week, and get some testing for the GNU toolchain in case the Visual Studio toolchain does not, if GMP does not compile under the Visual Studio toolchain. So we'll see how it works. So potentially we are open to using the GNU toolchain, but we need to do some testing.
Okay, fantastic. That's great feedback. So, should that be successful, it sounds like the path forward with this is to swap out that library and then make the simple parameter change in the pricing formula in both Geth and Open Ethereum, where we change this G quad parameter from 20 to 200.
I suggest that we make a final decision during the next call because I cannot commit us to anything without testing first.
Okay. So just to be clear, is the case that if we are able to compile this Rust GMP library with the new toolchain on Windows, that this is the appropriate path forward for Open Ethereum?
Well, if it works well, then why not?
And 2 weeks might be a bit late, so perhaps if it's possible, we could try to investigate it next week and just decide on all core dev calls that if the library works out, then let's have it included. Let's do the number bump to 200 and run with it.
I mean, alternatively, we could lower the number on the testnet, and then if Open Ethereum says no, it doesn't really work for us, then we'll just screw it. Then, but we're not going to deploy it on mainnet.
Oh yeah, but that kind of also means that so if we create a configuration where some EIP is enabled, so essentially in Geth, when you say that, okay, next hard fork is Berlin, then the hard fork, you just specify one block number and it implicitly collects the EIPs that you enable. So if we want to throw out one EIP from Berlin, that means we need to modify the code so the previous, so Geth will not run on the testnet anymore because the Berlin hard fork definition. And I don't want to add two different Berlin versions in Geth.
But I mean, these are ephemeral testnets.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
So are you suggesting adding this to the list of the Berlin ones?
Yeah, I don't really care about that, how we do it. But what I felt was a good idea was maybe to actually, if we're gonna spin up a testnet in the next whatever week, we could just lower this threshold, because that means we can do it's more easy to do actual benchmark for external people like me, if I know that the Open Ethereum client is configured with the lower gas price. And then in the end, if we decide that it doesn't work, then we just drop it from Berlin and don't have it on mainnet. And what Peter meant is that if we keep redefining Berlin, then it's going to be messy. But that's only a problem if the testnet is going to be persistent. That's what I meant.
Yeah, I mean, it seems reasonable to me if we can change this from 20 to 200 for these alpha testnets. Then we'll have changed that, and then it's for Geth there are no changes at that point, and then for Open Ethereum, it would be looking at if they can switch the library out before mainnet.
Can we make this decision on Monday or on Tuesday? I expect that we will have some results by then.
Sure.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, of course. I just wanted to make sure that we don't wait 2 weeks to get to a final decision on this.
Okay. So
okay, fantastic.
We can
Great,
add
so
we can,
yeah, sorry.
Well, we can add that to the things. So getting the addresses, Greg finishing on Monday, maybe by Tuesday we could have all of these pieces wrapped up. We can set that as a goal.
I think that's good. Everyone kind of knows what they're supposed to do for the most part. And there's kind of a, for lack of a better word, champion for each thing, because Greg's figuring out his thing. Kelly will check back in Monday or Tuesday on the results of Artem's benchmarks, and what was the last thing?
The address for the BLS.
Oh, yeah. And then that one is Alex Vlasov.
Yep.
Cool.
So I'll reach out to you guys, and by Tuesday next week, let's wrap that up.
Okay, great. Thanks, James. Yeah, so it sounds like the plan is we'll make this change from 20 to 200 on the CIP, and I'll work directly with Artem on the tool chain stuff, and we'll get an answer to you on Monday, or James. Thanks for the feedback.
All right. Thanks, Kelly. All right. The next item on the agenda is EIP 2481, adding request IDs to the ETH protocol request and response objects. I believe that is Who's that
It's
again?
me, Christoph. I'm on the call.
Oh, awesome. Hey, Christoph. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So okay. So this EAP 2481 is about a change in the ETH networking protocol, moving it from ETH 65 to ETH 66. And yeah, it's about adding request IDs to all the request response pairs that we have. We've talked about that outside of this meeting at last DevCon with some of the client team implementers. And it's basically what the LES protocol also already has. So the objective is that we can save some. We can make the networking slightly more efficient if we don't have to loop through all the incoming responses and try to match them to the request based on their contents, which sometimes means for things like get node data that you have to catch up over the content to match it to the requested hashes. And instead, with the request IDs, you can early on you can just say, oh, okay, this is not the response that I'm looking for, so I don't further look into this. So yeah, that's basically what it is about, and the EAP keeps it quite simple. So for instance, it doesn't dictate that response IDs need to be sequential. So client teams are free to implement this. Like you can say, across different request types, I might share the same request IDs because the request responses are already separated by the type anyway. Or we also don't, the EAP doesn't define, or it keeps it flexible that response IDs can also include, can also be duplicates. So the IDs can be duplicates, which means you can't totally ignore the thing and put a constant, like put it to 0, which basically means, okay, I just do what we do right now, like we treat it as if there are no request IDs. So this is to basically keep it simple from the implementation side. But for the clients that care about making this a little bit more efficient, they can implement it properly. And yeah, we talked about this at last DevCon with some of the Geth team, and I think Peter also signaled that they support us with Geth, and yeah, that's basically it from my side so far.
I've taken a look at the proposal. Seems quite easy to implement in Open Ethereum. The only thing is that we haven't merged ETH65 yet, but after we do ETH65, which should be, I think, in May or June, this one should be fairly quick to implement and merge.
Do we have other opinions or comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that the proposal would make quite a few things a lot simpler, because so for example, Geth, whenever there's two peers connect on the ETH protocol, Geth does a few challenges just to make sure that the other side is on the correct chain, to make sure that the other side is synchronized if we are not yet synchronized, and these kinds of challenges. And apart from that, we also retrieve some data concurrently. And generally, it's a bit ugly to match up, because essentially there are times when we just shoot off 3 requests to a node, and then the 3 requests eventually the replies come in, and it's, well, for once it's really annoying to mix and match the replies to the requests. The other one is that often the replies are empty, in which case you really just have to guess what the reply might be for. So all of these scenarios would be really elegantly solved by the request reply IDs. The only only problem that I'm not sure, it may be that one mostly affects us and Open Ethereum, is that we cannot really drop support for the old protocols. So for us, every protocol is just additional complexity, because as long as somebody is running the old one, we cannot just nuke it. But still, I think the proposal itself is a step in a very good direction. So let's run with it.
But we will be able to drop 63, 64, and 65 eventually. So it will be simpler in the end.
Well, yeah, eventually, but for now, there are still peers running 63. Well, actually,
in theory, we could end of life 63 and just set a date for it at some point here.
well, I guess the next hard fork is implicitly the end of life for it, because you need to update your client to be on the next hard fork. So whatever is the lowest common denominator will be the last supported version, and we can drop everything below it.
Maybe we can look at eeping that just to be nice and clear and give everybody lots of leeway to know that we're going to stop supporting it. Not to sidetrack things, back to the discussion.
I don't think we need that much bureaucracy around it.
Okay, if anyone wants to make an eep out of that, feel free. But yeah, I don't have an opinion on the matter. Anybody else have comments on 2481? And real quick, Piper and Trinity team, I apologize. I don't always bring up Trinity when I'm talking about mainnet clients. What's the status of syncing to ETH1 mainnet? And do you all want me to have you all be more included in some of the stuff when I bring in Nethermind, Besu, Open Ethereum, and Geth?
So the current status is that we have dropped fast sync a while ago because it was just not working for us, not a viable option. So since we started implementing BeamSync, this is actually looking quite good for us. So we've been able to follow the mainnet chain, and we're still in the process of implementing the parts of BeamSync that deal with like backfilling the state, backfilling blocks header. So to sum it up, we plan to go in beta within, I would say, let's say maybe 2 or 3 months. I don't want to make a hard commitment here, but this is just like my general feeling. So yeah, we certainly also like to be included. I actually noticed that we were missing on the spreadsheet earlier for balance support. So yeah, we haven't started to implement any Berlin EAPs, but we definitely will, and we try hard to soon be a client that we will actually promote as for people to try out as a mainnet client.
Okay, great. That absolutely answers my question, and we will definitely include you on the sheet. And if I just forget in future meetings, just point it out, like, hey, we're over here, and I'll bring it up. Thanks so much.
They're already included.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Thanks.
Next up, we have EVM 384, an alternative route to precompiles for supporting BLS 12381 on the EVM. That's AXIC.
Yeah, I will try to be quick. So, despite, I may have come off that I don't really want BLS 12 support earlier on the call, but I just really want BLS 12 support to be done well. And I felt like that maybe some questions are still really outstanding for the precompiles. So regarding BLS 12 in the WASM team, we also have been working on benchmarking BLS 12 in WASM itself. Because obviously the reason of E2 using it, as well as recursive snarks, at least some projects want to use it for recursive snarks. And to that end, we have So first of all, I shared a document on the Gitter channel, which has some of these details. At the very end of it, there's a chart with some numbers, and these are numbers on benchmarking BLS12 implementation, a pairing on WASM. And so the same code, well, actually, so we have a native implementation in Rust, and we are using WASM Snark's BLS12 implementation for the WASM part. And the native code is running around like 5 milliseconds. The WASM Snark implementation in WASM on a WASM interpreter is running around 500 milliseconds. And this WASM code doesn't use any host functions or anything. It is just purely WASM. And then we started to use big number or big integer host functions for the WASM code, which would be similar how EVM has 256-bit operations. But in this case, in WASM, we added 384-bit integer operations as host functions, which means those are not implemented inside WASM, rather the engine provides it, and it's implemented natively. And with those optimizations, we were able to get down to close to 15 milliseconds. And we think there's still more opportunity to optimize that code and make it faster. So that means we're like roughly 3 times slower than native in WASM. And then we also were thinking whether we can replicate these findings on the EVM. And that's what EVM 384 is. So we had a couple of different options to do this. And basically, we are introducing 3 new opcodes. I mean, none of this is final or ready for any IP or anything like that. These are still just experimentations. And we have implemented what I have listed here as option 1, which means that we have 3 opcodes, modular addition, modular subtraction on 384-bit numbers, and Montgomery multiplication on 384-bit numbers. And these 3 opcodes in EVM operate on memory only. And we have implemented a synthetic benchmark written in Yule, so it compiles to EVM. The reason for the synthetic benchmark is that, obviously, so we have spent probably 2 weeks on this project so far, and we cannot really implement a complete BLS12 pairing on EVM in 2 weeks. So we decided to only take a small building block used by the pairing operation. And the synthetic benchmark tries to approximate the complexity of the pairing operation using this small building block. And we have built this synthetic benchmark using WASM Snark, and we have implemented the counterpart in EVM. So in EVM, the actual implementation is in EVM 1, and the bytecode is written using Yule. And what we have found, so our approximation isn't like fully closely approximating the pairing operation yet, but it is within like 20% to the pairing operation. And what we have found is that we get pretty good results on the EVM. I don't have the final numbers yet, and we need to optimize quite a bit on the EVM part. But the initial results show that it seems to be possible to get somewhat close to the WASM performance with the host functions. So what this would mean in the end is it may be potentially possible to support BLS12 with more primitive additions to the EVM and not true precompiles. This may have been quite a bit of information, and the document is more comprehensive. But if anybody has any questions now.
Well, what would be the final number compared to, not even compared to WASM, maybe in abstract milliseconds per pairing? Because it's very difficult to compile multipliers. And WASM Snark is not the fastest one, and definitely not as fast as one which goes into precompile. And those are already quite expensive to use.
So which number are you looking for?
I mean, you said that WASM Snark or something which is actually not the fastest library in the West. It's 5 milliseconds per pairing. In this case, you should also specify what is the number of pairs, actually.
So it's a 2-point pairing.
Well, I think the fastest library is 2-point pairings in something like 2 milliseconds, but still. And you get the performance which is 3 times slower than this with EVM, or the same performance. Like expected performance, not the full pairing, but expected performance.
Are you asking whether we expect performance to match the native?
No. I mean, well, let's say that Wasm Snark does a pairing of 2-point pairs with 5 milliseconds of writing time. What would be like expected performance with if you would add this EVM functions? This part I didn't get in clear. Would it be like the same one as Wasm Snark, or would it be like factor of 3 or 5 higher? This part I just didn't get from the last part of the explanation.
Yeah, because I don't have the final numbers to share on that. Because we run the benchmarking on a different machine, so it's not comparable. But we definitely aim to get very close to the WASM, and I expect that we can. Yeah, I hope we can get to maybe 50% slower if than the WASM version.
Well, this is kind of already, if you say 50% slower, it would be already 5 times slower than the native code. And it already gets quite expensive. Like it would be 10 millisecond roughly of execution time on EVM, which is I think 300, I think 3 million or something like this, if I do the math correctly. Like 3 million gas
in
per
terms
operation.
Yeah, so in terms of gas, we don't have, I mean, the current BLS precompile EIP don't have any gas, proposed gas values. Well, at least last I checked, which was a month ago. Maybe it does now. But we hope to not exceed maybe twice the cost of what's there in terms of gas. But yeah, obviously we don't have the final numbers on any of these things yet.
I mean,
I was going to time box this real quick. If you could just have final thoughts.
It's more or less that the WASM implementation which you compare against is already not the fastest one, and it's already much slower than the one which was proposed, which is a native code which is integrated right now, and for which there are numbers in the proposal.
For the native code, we are using for the native code we are using your code. And are you saying that Wasm Snark isn't the fastest? I believe it is the fastest on most of the Wasm interpreter cases we have ever used it with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so just even the native code itself is already quite expensive for kind of not like everyday use, but it's already quite expensive. Taking into account modern snarks, which are much trickier to check. And making it factor of 5 at the end of the day is kind of prohibitively expensive.
So I have a question for Axik. I hope it's a quick one. I'm wondering about the complexity. So to recap, it's like you have 3 opcodes and to replace a number of precompiles. And I'm wondering these 3 opcodes, how difficult are those opcodes and how large, how many lines of code is it to implement those small Lego bits? Do you have any rough numbers on that?
Yeah, we have a bunch of different implementations of those opcodes in terms of C. And I believe it's like roughly 100, 150 lines of code for the 3 opcodes in C.
Damn. That's not much.
Okay. We're out of time here, so I did want to go real quick, and before we go, quickly say what decisions have been made today and any action items so that the note taker can note that on the meeting notes, and we can reference that in the video at the end if people look back on this. So first of all, we are making what we're calling an ephemeral testnet named YOLO. Ephemeral Berlin testnet named YOLO, which is going to include the following EIPs: EIP 2315 and EIP 2537. For sure, we are potentially going to include EIP, was it 2046? Pending results from an open Ethereum benchmarking that will finish by Tuesday, most likely. The simple subroutines for the EVM has some outstanding specification issues that will be solved also by Tuesday as the expected date. Greg and Martin are getting involved on that, and you can contact James Hancock if you want to get involved in that discussion. And the BLS 12381 curve with EIP 2537 is going to have the precompiles listed by Alex Vlasov, who's the champion of that EIP, by early next week in order to make that specification also final. What am I missing?
So the other EIP for the testnet, the one I think Martin said we should just do, is not 2046, but it's 2565, right? It's the ModX precompile.
Ah, thank you. So it's not 2046, it's 20, what was it,
2565.
2565. Yep. Okay. Thank you. So yeah, note taker, please take note on that. The decisions made last time is that Berlin will be dependent on the BLS EIP. Subroutines may or may not make it. We now know that subroutines will be making it. And then actions needed. Decision required on looking at the contract code for simple subroutines. That's 86.1 if you're looking at the notes from meeting 86. 86.2 is James to reach out to Alexi for Merkleization and simple subroutines.
That happened.
That happened, okay. 86.3, ProgPow compromise proposal to be decided on, and then in parentheses it says testnet then pocket. That was Greg's request to have about a month of discussion within the community about ProgPow going into a hard fork and or it being put on a testnet and then pocketed when we need it as a compromise. So that discussion is ongoing. Nothing's been decided today on that. That's just me going over the action item that was decided on last time. Update EIP bot with withdrawn and move EIP 2583 to withdrawn are the other two action items. Is there any disagreement on the decisions made or action items I've listed?
2515, the difficulty bomb was withdrawn from Berlin.
Yes, 2515 has been withdrawn from Berlin. That is a current decision made that should be noted. The EIP statuses on last week's notes are now in the repository. Everyone can check those out if you want. I didn't want to go through all of them, but some of them are EFI, some of them are accepted, etc. That's it.
One quick note about that. I know James, I think you're the author for the James, you're the author for the EIP EFI list, and Alex, you're the author for the Meta EIP. And I think there's a bunch of pending PRs against both, like from Puja. I know I have either a PR or a modification on Puja's PR, but it would be good if we could merge both the EFI and the Berlin Meta EIPs so that they're up to date, because that's kind of where the community goes to look at this stuff.
Okay, who was needing to look that over? Just an editor, or was there a particular person?
So no, I think it needs to be the author. So I think for
it's me for the EFI and Alex for the Berlin.
Yeah,
Alex, he wants to do something different.
Axic, okay, got it. Okay. Any other comments? Final stuff.
A comment about the networking EIP 2481. That one still needs to be merged as a draft, and I guess we have decided to do it, or I don't know what the.
We can merge it as a draft regardless of any decisions made. It can be in draft status as long as it is well formed. So I think there's some outstanding comments, or did they? Oh, actually,
It's approved.
Okay. I'll merge it right now.
And
Cool.
did we want to have an EFI or talk about that next time?
Let's talk about that next time. There's not
Okay.
a reason to have EFI on that today. Okay, next call is May 29th at 1400 UTC. Thanks everyone so much for coming, and we will see you then. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that summary. That was immensely
you,
helpful
everyone.
for us.
Sure.
Cheers.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.